Hi, this is Darin Hovis with Par 4 Fitness. Today's topic, I wanted to take you through a bit of our assessments. And particularly, what we use is the KVest. So the KVest is a 3D system. I've got it here with me. So it's a 4-sensor system that we use to put on players. So 4 sensor locations are on the wrist, back of the torso, right in between the scapula, on the lead arm, and then also on the back of the pelvis. So what the KVest shows us is rotational velocity of each segment throughout the swing. So it's going to give us a really clear picture on how the energy is transferred from the ground up and what sequence does the player do that? Do you do that? And where are some of the inefficiencies? Where are you losing power? Where are you losing speed? And maybe what are some of the weaker areas that we can work on physically? So we always team this up with a movement assessment, as well as an analysis of what you're working on with your swing coach. So we know a lot of movement issues are caused by maybe a misunderstanding of the task at hand. It's not always a physical limitation, but a lot of the time it is. And that's where we come into play. So if we can analyze how you're moving physically with a tool like the KVest, it's just really sets us up for much more efficient improvement, so we can make that improvement faster, and we're programming exactly what each player needs. We're not guessing as to, oh, okay, it kind of looks like you do this in the swing, but well, with the KVest, we know exactly what you're doing throughout the swing here. So I wanted to show you just a graph of what I look at when I'm going through a KVest screening. And so I'm going to pull up, this is from a couple of years ago, back when we only had 3 sensors. So this is me. So just your kind of high level amateur player. You'll notice that in summary, I transition well. So in my downswing, I get my hips, my torso, and my wrist peaking in the right order. But in terms of speed, I'm a bit inefficient. So what I see is that my torso accelerates the fastest, and then my hips kind of lag behind. So if I move back up to the graph here, you'll see that as I near this impact line, my hips are quite late in the sequence. So what happens is I don't maximize the stretch between my lower body and my upper body. So in the past, 4 years now, that's something that I've used to focus on, and it's been something that's gotten a lot better. My peak speed sequence have improved because I was able to analyze exactly what I was doing in that sequence. Now here you take a player who was a conference champion and a high-level elite college golfer, and you're going to see some of the same tendencies out of this graph that you did with mine. You'll notice that there are 4 sensors here now. This was taken last month, but this player transitioned very well. One thing that he had going for him were his speeds were at or above PGA Tour level speeds there for hips, torso, lead arm, and the wrist. So something that we look for is, okay, how does he transition? What's that peak speed sequence? So like me, a little fast with the arms. So you can follow my cursor here. The blue line peaks first. So the conversation that I had with the player was, okay, we may want to look at why you're doing this. And for him, it came back to a shoulder injury, which would kind of make his arms and hands go out head of the upper body and the lower body, and that's where some of his misses would come from. So what we wanted to work on with our training together was address how well that shoulder is moving, and then the strength that is associated with that. So I always say you wouldn't want to shoot a cannon from a canoe, and the scapula should be a very stable base to operate from. So the job of the scapula is to control the position of the hand throughout the golf swing. So for us, if we look a little bit deeper into these graphs, I know it just looks like spaghetti noodles to you, but to me, this is basically kind of an art form of the golf swing, particularly when you take a high-level player like this one. So I'm going to start up here in the top left corner with pelvic bend. I know we talk about pelvic tilt all the time. That's essentially pelvic bend. So any move in the positive direction is going to be an arching of the low back where we get more lordosis. And any tucking underneath is going to be a posterior tilt or bend in this matter towards impact. We see that. So we see this sharp decline. And this is exactly what we want to see throughout a golf swing. I'll see a lot of unstable hip movers. So the more that we can get control of the pelvis like this player has, the better. And that's something that generates a lot of speed and power for him. So one of the key influencers of the golf swing is the hips. And if you can control the hips, then things get much more easy up top. So for us, if we go over to the right here, this player, he rotated back about 40 degrees, and then he's about equal coming through impact here as we reach this middle black line. So for us, this is something that we want to try to match up backswing to downswing numbers. So if we're rotating back 40, the hip should open up close to 40 degrees. So if we're only getting 30 degrees, which a lot of our club members do, or less, then you might not see as much on the front side unless you're doing something like a foot flare or working on internal rotation of the lead hip. The blue line is going to be indicative of how well does that player move laterally. So in the backswing where my cursor is, that should peak at about -10 to -12. And then when we go to impact, that should peak up around +10, +12. So it just, again, switches from one position to the other. Left hip takes over and moves around, and then the right hip takes over that same spot. And that moves up to the shoulders too. The same's necessarily true there. We're rotating back. If I move down to the bottom left graph here, this player is going to rotate about 75 degrees back with the shoulders, and then he's getting them open almost 50 degrees coming through. Whereas something where he would lose a little bit of that angle because the hands would move first. So this is where things start to not fall apart, but this is where we start to get into those misses. So for a professional player, this is particularly important because we don't want any of those misses to come up throughout the course of a 4-day tournament. If we can minimize those as much as possible, then we're much more able to shoot lower scores consistently. But for the amateur player, if we can start to match up these positions from swing to swing much more readily, then we're going to have more consistency, but we're also going to have a lot more power. So I know a lot of us aren't playing 4-day tournaments like this one is, but knowing your misses, what causes them physically, but also what goes on with your club path and your club face is of paramount importance. I think a lot of people are just guessing when they are out on the course and they see that shot go off to the right and say, wow, I picked my head up on it. Well, that's a pretty easy excuse to pinpoint. But the fact of the matter is, it could be something going on with the foot. It could be something going on with the knee, hip. mid-back, shoulder. The head is really the last piece of the puzzle there, and usually that's a result of something else going on in the swing. So picking your head up, that's kind of a lazy excuse. So if someone's telling you that, we say, well, I know that I tend to move towards my toes, I'm just going to push my knees forward, and I tend to extend up a little bit, my head comes back, so it looks like I come up, but in reality my eyes are still on the ball. I haven't truly picked my head up, and for example, that's not really important anyways. If you look at Annika Sorenstam or David Duval, when they are at the top of their games, at impact, they're looking at their target. So that's not something that is a requirement of a good golf swing. But there sure as heck are a lot of those throughout the swing. Controlling the hip motion, shoulder position is really key from setup to backswing through impact there as well. So I do the shoulder plane drill a lot, where I have you set up, take the club across your shoulders, and then you're just trying to point it down towards your tee, which is about 3 or 4 feet in front of you, back, and then through. And that's going to help you keep the same plane moving back and forth. And I guarantee you, if you're doing that correctly, you're not going to lose posture. That motion is going to look a lot more like a touring professional. Now we just need to transition that to when you're swinging a golf club. So we go from some of those drills to getting a club in your hand. And then eventually that last step is then getting a ball into the mix there as well. But I think a lot of players go right to I want to hit the ball, and that's taking yourself down a path that you're really not going to create better motion. You're just going to keep doing the same things that you were before. So again, without a club, good motion. With a club, even better motion. And then with a ball, that's when we want to see that even better motion start to seep in. So be really diligent and really mindful of what you're doing without the club, without the ball. And that plays a lot of benefits into when you put that ball in front of you, especially when you're in a pressure situation. You can fall back onto that position and all that good work that you put in before. The last graph that I wanted to go through, so this bottom right graph, spine rotation, X factor, as we call it, is something that's important for creating a stretch and a shortened cycle throughout the swing. So what this graph is picking up is any difference between the lower body and the upper body. So in this position, at setup, this high-level professional player was about 15 degrees open with his shoulders compared to his hips. And then as he rotates back, you're going to see that goes the opposite way. So now his shoulders are now closed, almost 40 degrees to the hips. And that's something that we are able to take into account as we create a bit more of a stretch. So we would say this player is downswing loading. He's creating more of a stretch into his downswing, and then he's able to shorten that rapidly. You see this steep incline towards zero again as the lower body and the upper body square up. Now, if you're trying to hit a cut, we want the upper body a little bit out ahead of the lower. If we're trying to hit a nice little tight draw, like this player does, then we're going to see that upper body kind of lag behind a bit as he swings in to out. So some of the tendencies you see with the KVest in ball flight, but also on these graphs too, player tendencies tend to show up quickly. Whereas mine, if we go back to this one and we look at my X factor stretch, not as tight. I create a little bit of separation, but mine's not quite as fast because my upper body outraces my lower body a bit too much. So I don't have that steeper incline like the professional player does. So it's something easy that's able to you're able to throw into the mix here. And for us, it's an invaluable tool to get us into a position where we're analyzing what's truly going on with the golf swing, but also able to move that into your program and make you a much more efficient mover through the technology, but also our knowledge of human motion in general, not just golf. So that's just a quick overview of some things that we do with KVest. We'll be talking other subjects here as well. I will bring out the body track as well, which is our force plate. But we'll have plenty of other topics to take us through the month here as well. So thanks for tuning in.